Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We will begin in just a minute as we let people come in. All right. As people are coming in, I'll just get started here. And just to say thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We are very excited to present this webinar here on the NDC 3.0 Navigator with the NDC Partnership, Ricardo Energy and Environment, and also the UNFCCC Secretariat. The first thing I'll go through is our quick agenda for today. We will be having some opening remarks and introductions of the partners that are involved in the Navigator itself, going through the methodology used to develop the Navigator, as well as providing an interactive walkthrough and demonstration of the Navigator and how to use it related to different questions and topics. And then there will be a dedicated Q&A section for everyone to speak in the chat and in the Q&A about any questions they may have for us. So I'm going to briefly introduce myself. My name is Sarah Hertel, and I am the NDC Enhancement Knowledge Specialist at the NDC Partnership Support Unit based in Washington, D.C. And I have a few logistical and housekeeping notes to make first before we get started. The first is that we are happy to offer this webinar with interpretation into Spanish and also into French. And if you would like to listen to the webinar in a language other than the default language of English, please follow the instructions that I'm about to say. I will also put them in the chat for you to access, and you can also see on the screen. So at the bottom of your Zoom window, click on the icon that looks like a globe and says interpretation underneath it. Once you click on that interpretation icon, a pop-up window will appear showing available languages for interpretation. So you will then select your preferred language from that list. And then to hear that interpretation clearly, you'll need to mute the original audio to avoid overlapping sound by clicking mute original audio. And that instruction in French and Spanish and English is all on this slide here. If you have any issues with translation, please send a note in the chat and we will do our best to help you rectify that. And the next piece here is related to our chat and Q&A function. So we do have both available, both chat and Q&A. So at this time, we would love if you would be able to introduce yourselves and your organization and or country that you're joining from in the chat. But if you do have specific questions for the speakers, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen so that we can see your question. So that will be located in the middle of your screen. It looks like a little chat bubble and it says Q&A, and you can put your questions there and we will address them. The next two things are more logistic and participation related. So the presentation will be shared and any highlighted resources will also be shared in a follow-up email following the webinar, and the session is being recorded. So it will be shared on the NDC Partnership YouTube channel, and you will be able to access that recording after the webinar has concluded. So with that, we'll jump into the content and setting the scene of this important topic. So NDCs and LTLEDs, or long-term low-emission development strategies, constitute a powerful starting point for translating countries' climate commitments into investment actions, creating the basis and policy signals for a transition to a low carbon economy and the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. So we acknowledge the intricate relationship between climate and development and how paramount it is for cultivating comprehensive strategies that advance environmental sustainability, socioeconomic progress, and resilience to climate change. And in order to close the mitigation and adaptation gaps identified by the Global Stocktake and the other gap reports, countries need to enhance the ambition of their climate commitments in the short term through their NDCs and also in the long term through their long-term low emissions development strategies, or LTLEDs. And members of the NDC Partnership and partners are also going to try to scale up their commitments specifically to support these needs and deliver on the goals of the Paris Agreement with our support. The way that we are supporting the ambition raising of this round of NDCs is through the NDC Partnership's global call on NDCs 3.0 and LTLEDs. As we saw in the report of the technical dialogue of the Global Stocktake, we are significantly off track to achieve the Paris Agreement goals. The Global Stocktake can serve as a moment for course correction and ramp up ambition as a way to act with necessary urgency. As I mentioned before, NDCs and LTLEDs constitute a powerful starting point for translating country commitments into investment actions and policy, and it is also key to make sure that those are aligned. The countries that are raising their ambition and their NDCs are on a timeline. We have a 2025 timeline for the next round of NDCs, NDCs 3.0, to be submitted. And they are still critical planning instruments to tackle climate challenges and are essential to laying down frameworks for implementable climate actions that lead to unlocking finance at scale and meeting the Sustainable Development Goals, ensuring a low carbon and resilient future. The NDC Partnership's global call is a mechanism to provide dedicated resources and expertise for countries to align and update their NDCs and LTLEDs aligned with the Paris Agreement. And that is our mechanism of support for countries that can be utilized through the NDC 3.0 Navigator as well, which I will go into briefly later. This is some data from the Global Call's request for support thus far. It was updated as of earlier this month, where you can see that 63 countries have requested support through the Global Call, and among those countries, there's been a 40% increase in demand for NDC 3.0 support in this last month. 25 of those countries are also aiming to develop their own LTLEDs. There are also 12 countries working on developing requests through the global call that have not yet submitted them, but we do have a number that are interested in just NDC development, just LTLED development, and then also with a combination of the two. The country plans, needs, and challenges. So there's a number of countries that intend to submit NDCs 3.0, 25 of which aim to submit by Q1 of 2025, and even more by the end of 2025 or early 2026. So this is just some scene setting for the actual Navigator itself and why we developed it. So as you know, there's no shortage of guidance on how to develop and raise ambition of NDCs, but it can be challenging for countries to navigate through this while also trying to incorporate the outcomes of the global stocktake and identify the ambition raising opportunities most relevant to them. The Navigator, the NDC 3.0 Navigator, helps draw together and present this information in one place. The NDC 3.0 Navigator was developed in partnership and collaboration with the United Nations UNFCCC secretariat, and it was developed to help governments in developing countries and the organizations and individuals supporting them with their NDCs 3.0. The Navigator also contains useful information for anyone interested in understanding the wider context around NDCs and the opportunities presented by NDCs 3.0. The NDC Navigator itself is an interactive tool that supports the development of NDCs to be submitted in 2025 or NDCs 3.0 with the aim of helping countries raise ambition and accelerate implementation in this next round. The primary audience for the NDC 3.0 Navigator is governments in developing countries, as well as the organizations and individuals supporting them in their NDCs 3.0 development. And it also contains useful information for anyone interested in this. The Navigator brings together expert-created resources and strategies to support countries in implementing the global stocktake outcomes and also raising their ambition in ways that will be implementable and financeable, helping countries to reflect on their current circumstances nationally, their climate ambition, and wider development goals. So with that, I will bring in our NDC Partnership and UNFCCC Secretariat Liaison, Monica, to speak more about the UNFCCC's specific involvement in this development process.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I hope you can hear me. I cannot turn on my camera. It says that the host has blocked me.
Oh, apologies. Let me
worry.
fix that for you.
So thank you so much again for, I hope it's from you, the issue, not from me. Yeah, fine. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. It is my pleasure to be here. My name is, as Sarah mentioned, Monica Chegoyen, and I am the liaison of the collaboration between the UNFCCC Secretariat and the NDC Partnership. And I want to give some comments or context on the collaboration of the Secretariat in developing this tool of the Navigator. This collaboration comes in the context of the outcome of the GST to support efforts towards moving from ambition to action and to ensure a coordinated support for countries to develop their new NDC. The NDC 3.0, as we are calling this new update of NDC, are expected to be a progression beyond previous NDCs and should reflect the highest possible ambition. They should also accelerate implementation, unlock finance, and be very well positioned to credibly move the climate agenda into a fully implementation of the Paris Agreement. So as I said, the global stocktake process requested organizations in a position to do so, and particularly the Secretariat, including through its regional collaboration centers, to provide capacity building support for the preparation and communication of the next nationally determined contribution. In view of this, the Executive Secretary of the UNFCCC convened a meeting on the beginning of March in 2024 in Bonn, and key organizations as the NDC Partnership jointly laid the groundwork to ensure that we will have all the support possible for countries to develop their NDC 3.0 Navigator. In that meeting, we developed the framework of the main, what we are calling now, routes of implementation of NDC 3.0 and how can the outcome of the GST can be summarized in a way that countries can identify where are their opportunities to enhance. Finally, I just want to say that it's important to mention that the information collected was reviewed by the Secretariat with a focus of eliminate any kind of prescriptive text that can indicate what a country should do, but more to give a tool or give information for countries to take their decision based in their nationally determined circumstances. Thank you very much, Sarah. Back to you.
Thanks very much, Monica. So now we'll move on to just a quick overview of the structure of the Navigator before I hand it over to my colleagues at Ricardo to do more of a deep dive on the content and development process. But the Navigator itself presents the content and importance of NDCs 3.0 and how countries can respond to the outcomes of the first global stocktake by reflecting on their current national circumstances, climate ambition, and wider development goals to identify nationally appropriate opportunities for NDC enhancement. So in order to help countries to explore the most impactful opportunities and strategies to raise their ambition and strengthen implementation, the tool has built on currently available support and resources and will be also further developed over time as additional guidance becomes available. The tool complements our global call, as I mentioned earlier, and is structured into 3 different sections for countries and also partners to use when going through the Navigator. The first being learning about the context of NDCs 3.0 and the Navigator itself, reflecting on country needs and priorities for this upcoming NDC round, and then also exploring the routes and opportunities to creating ambitious and implementable NDCs 3.0. As Monica mentioned, we did develop different routes to explore ambitious and implementable NDCs. There are 7 routes in total, with 3 that are meant to help countries reflect on the first global stocktake and raise ambition, and 4 that are meant to help countries ensure their NDCs are implementable. So together, the routes offer a common framework that countries can use to map a nationally relevant, impactful approach to strengthening their NDC 3.0 submissions, drawn from the latest science and are also informed by the global stocktake and reflections on national circumstances and priorities. Within each route, users are able to then explore opportunities on how they can achieve their stated goals and can then see specific case studies to consider, as well as strategies, further resources, and suggestions on other routes to explore and opportunities should they want to look at other options or additional options to what they've so far seen. As I mentioned, the Navigator itself is a living collaborative tool. So we encourage you, should you have any guidance or strategies or case studies to contribute to the Navigator that have not already been added, to do so on the Navigator's website at the link listed here. And you will be able to submit your name, contact information, organization, and information on the resources that you are submitting for consideration. We will then come together regularly to evaluate those that have been submitted and add them to the Navigator as we assess their relevance and applicability to the different criteria that we use to include more in the Navigator. So please submit any and all resources that you think would be beneficial to NDC 3.0 development. And finally, there's also an option for those countries that are utilizing the Navigator in developing their NDCs 3.0 to request more information from the NDC Partnership Support Unit and in collaboration also with the UNFCCC Secretariat's support opportunities as well on the Navigator website through the Support Opportunities form. In this form, you'll be able to also include your name and contact information, the country you are from, your ministry or other piece of government that you are involved in, and then any information that you are seeking from the partnership in terms of support. I will preface this, so this is not actually an official request for support from the partnership, but instead just an inquiry to learn more information. And we will then connect you with the appropriate country engagement specialist to help you to develop your request. So with that, I will hand this over to my colleagues at Ricardo, who will do a much more deeper dive into the Navigator itself, and I will let them introduce themselves as well.
Hi, thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much. And good morning, good afternoon, everybody. It's a real pleasure to join you all today and talk about the NDC 3.0 Navigator. So a really exciting project that myself and my colleague Maya here both worked on for quite a lot of this year. So my name is Dr. Rose Bailey. I'm an Associate Director in Climate Action Planning and Transparency and the Paris Agreement processes for an organization called Ricardo. We work globally on energy and environmental issues, supporting a lot of countries on all aspects of transparency, Paris Agreement, climate change, reporting, and so on. And it was our pleasure to collaborate with the NDC Partnership and the UNFCCC and other partners to develop the technical content for the Navigator. So myself and Maya are going to take you through, and I'll let Maya introduce herself when she comes in a moment. We'll take you through the process that we went through in developing the Navigator, and we're also going to do a little live walkthrough of the different sections within the tool, and you can follow along with us if you like, and see how the different sections work, how to find the information and the kind of information that's contained within it. So we really hope to give you a good feel for how this tool works, how you can use it, and inspire you to go away and feel confident having a look at the information that's contained within it and reflect on how it can support you. First of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we developed the Navigator. So Sarah, if you can go on to the next slide. Excuse me. So as Sarah and Monica mentioned, this was developed through a very collaborative process. So many organizations came together at a meeting in Bonn where we agreed the overall architecture of the Navigator and the 7 routes to ambition and implementation for the next NDCs. Our team then took away a lot of that information and we went through a series of different steps to develop the technical content that you see today in the web tool. So the first step that we went, if you can click, Sarah, is to do a really comprehensive review and stocktake of existing guidance and tools that exist. As Sarah mentioned at the beginning, there is a lot of information out there on NDCs. There's a lot of good practices that already exists. Countries are going through this now for the 3rd time and implementing partners are supporting now for the 3rd time. So there's lots of learning that can be drawn upon. The aim of the Navigator is not to, as we would say, reinvent the wheel, but really to understand what exists out there, what are the good practices and the guidance that can be brought together in one place in a much more accessible way to support this next round. So the first step was really to understand that landscape of information that exists. The second step, if you click again, Sarah, was then to do some deeper interviews and a comprehensive survey with a number of different NDC partnership member countries and implementing partners, and I'll show you those on the next slide. And this was really to understand a little bit more about some of the priorities, some of the challenges, some of the needs, and make sure that we were capturing all of the good practices and all of the guidance that existed, recognizing that there are many things that are in development, that this is a very rapidly evolving space. So those engagement with different partners in different countries really helped to make sure that the content of the Navigator was grounded in the real life experiences on the ground of people working at the forefront of NDC development. So the third stage then was the development of the technical content itself based on the insights that we received. And so when we go into the tool, you'll see that within each of the routes, there's a number of strategies, as well as the resources and the case studies. And this content was really developed, for the most part, through the insights that we received, through those interviews, through those surveys, and through the existing guidance and tools that we collated. So we were looking to draw out what are the really impactful strategies that countries might want to think about implementing that might be most successful ways of tackling a particular topic or a particular challenge or realizing a specific opportunity. So those insights were really drawn from all of that background work to develop that technical content. And as Monica quite rightly emphasized, the way that we've done this and the way that this is framed is really to try not to be prescriptive in any way, but to give you the examples and the inspiration as to how you could go about realizing some of the opportunities based on the examples that exist out there. The fourth and really important stage in the development of the Navigator was a really comprehensive review process. So all of those organizations that we consulted with through surveys and through interviews were also given the opportunity to review and provide technical contributions to the technical content of the Navigator as well. So this meant that all of the draft text, for example, was shared widely with those organizations and implementing partners for their review and feedback and input, which was really critical in making sure that we were getting all of the wording right, that we were getting the best information possible to compile into this tool. So that was the process we went through. It took a few months to do all of this work, and then the Navigator was successfully launched at the SBs in Bonn in June. And if we go on to the next slide, Sarah, I can briefly show the organizations and the countries that we spoke to and engaged with. And if you click again, Sarah, yeah, we have the countries. So you can see it's a really wide range of organizations that fed in to this piece of work, covering a whole lot of different areas and different backgrounds. So to give a few examples, and every organization we spoke to was incredibly helpful and really impactful, but just to give a few examples of the kinds of specific inputs that we received. We talked to Unilever, for example, as a large multinational organization, to really understand what it takes for the private sector to engage in NDCs, what for the private sector might be looking for in terms of ambition raising and implementation, so that we could reflect that within the content. We spoke to LinkedIn, for example, who've done lots of work on green jobs and analysis of green skills and the kinds of things that countries might want to think about focusing on to develop their workforce for the future. We spoke to the Initiative for Climate Action Transparency, or ICAT, who do a lot of work supporting countries and building capacity on transparency processes, and they provided really helpful inputs around technical guidance and tools that can help link NDCs with things like the ongoing work towards the BTRs that are being submitted this year. We spoke to the International Labour Organization, who provided really useful insights around frameworks for thinking about just transitions. 2050 Pathways platform provided lots of really useful inputs around the alignment of NDCs with long-term strategies, or LTLEDs. I could go on and talk about all of the different partners in a lot more detail, but hopefully that gives you a bit of a sense of the types of organizations that we engaged with and the kinds of insights that they were able to bring to the Navigator and the different technical areas that they contributed to. Also, importantly, lots of countries, and we conducted interviews with NDC focal points from a whole suite of countries covering all regions of the world, who really provided their very specific insights into the opportunities and challenges, the gaps in the information that they were finding, the focus and their priorities for this round, some of the lessons learned and case studies and good practices from the last 2 rounds of NDC. So these were really, really insightful and really valuable interviews for understanding and grounding the messaging to make sure that it was really country relevant. So that's the partners that we engage with. I'm now going to hand to Maya, who's can introduce herself and can talk us through a little bit more the structure of the Navigator. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Rose. And hello, everyone. And thank you all very much for joining us. Before I begin, I'll briefly introduce myself. I'm Maya Rubin. As Rose introduced before, I'm a consultant at Ricardo on the Climate Action Planning and Transparency team. I've supported numerous countries to develop their NDCs and long-term strategies in the past, and I was project manager on the Ricardo side for this work. I am going to be taking you through now a little bit more of a deep dive into the structure of the Navigator before we head into our first walkthrough. Thank you, Sarah. So if you could click again, please, Sarah, we should have the 3 sections of the Navigator pop up on screen. Brilliant. And as introduced by Sarah earlier, there are 3 sections. The first one being Learn, the second one being Reflect, and then Explore. So that first section contains information on the NDC 3.0 Navigator as a tool, and also contains information on the context for NDCs 3.0, such as reflecting the first global stocktake concluded at COP28, some UNFCCC decisions regarding NDCs, and connections between NDCs and other national processes. The reflect section then provides an opportunity for countries to think back to their last NDC and consider any new needs and priorities for the NDC 3.0. And there are a series of questions included to help guide the user towards those relevant routes that Sarah introduced earlier. The Explore section then introduces and signposts to existing guidance and tools on a range of opportunities for enhancing ambition and accelerating implementation, split into those 7 routes. You will find the bulk of the content of the tool under that Explore section, but it's important to note that all of these sections can act as the entry point to the navigator. So a user might feel they already have a good understanding of the context behind NDCs and their own needs and priorities for the NDC 3.0 and might want to jump straight into that Explore section. They might also find that they maybe need to refresh their memory of what the context for NDCs 3.0 and could jump in at the Learn section. And in this way, the way the navigator can be used by countries, much like NDCs, can be nationally driven. Next slide, please, Sarah. I'm now going to provide a little bit of a deep dive into those routes that were introduced earlier. And as Sarah mentioned, they are sort of have a split into 2 themes. That top 3 are focused on ambition and reflecting on the first global stock take. And that's the bottom 4 are focused on making sure NDCs are implementable and reflect national needs and priorities. So we'll take those one by one and explore why each is important and what kind of information each contains. So first up, we have aligns to the Paris Agreement temperature goal, and this contains information related to mitigation targets, long-term strategy alignment, and sector-specific opportunities as some examples. And of course, as it says in the name, is important for meeting the Paris Agreement temperature goal. Next up, we have aligns to the Paris Agreement Global Goal on Adaptation, which similarly provides information on how to set targets and goals, how to formulate actions, and then some more specific areas such as incorporating loss and damage and nature-based solutions into NDCs. And this route is really important for accelerating adaptation efforts, which, as many of us know, is important in a warming world where adaptation might be a priority over mitigation for many countries. And then we have delivers a just and equitable transition. So this route is all about understanding societal impacts and benefits from the NDC and ensuring inclusive approaches to NDC development. And this is really important for ensuring that the low carbon climate resilient transition benefits all members of society equally and minimizing those negative impacts. Then we can move to the 4 at the bottom of the screen. Those ones that focus a little bit more on implementation. So first up there, we have mobilizes all of government and all of society. And this route is really focused on stakeholder engagement. And that might be across government, so different ministries and departments. It might be more vertical, so looking at engaging with more local governments. And it also includes elements around citizen engagement as well. This route's really important for ensuring widespread understanding and, importantly, ownership of NDCs. It was flagged in our interviews and surveys that quite often the NDCs are led out of one ministry, and other ministries find that they are not engaged in that process and not aware of what the NDC requires from them. So this route is all about making sure we bring everybody along in that process. We could then move on to technology and capacity building as needs and enablers. And this route is all about identifying needs and making sure we understand all the different transfer and uptake approaches available. Now, this is really useful for understanding how the targets can be met and whether they are achievable, what might be needed to make those targets achievable, and setting countries up for taking those next steps towards meeting those needs. We then have technically sound and transparent documents, which contains information on links to other processes, such as the Enhanced Transparency Framework, a lot of information on data considerations, and some more specific information, such as reflecting Article 6. Now, this is a really important concept throughout all the routes, as transparency aids both the clarity and the credibility of the NDC, but it was flagged as really important in those interviews and surveys, so it's also got its own route where all of that information is summarized. Finally, we have the Unlocks Finance route. Now, I believe this one is not quite out yet. It's a really important one. So it's going through additional rigorous review to make sure that all the information is ready to use by countries. But this will cover elements related to an enabling environment for investment, helping make sure that NDCs are investable, and understanding the different funding sources available and how those might match funding needs. And this is, of course, really important for unlocking that funding needed to implement the NDC. And as Rose mentioned before, what's really nice about these routes is that there was a really collaborative approach to their development. And those routes were sort of decided based on discussions within the project team, so amongst the Ricardo team, NDC Partnership and UN Climate Change, but also all of those member organizations and countries that you saw earlier on what topics were really important for NDCs and where those key needs, priorities, challenges lie. So they really do capture the feedback and inputs from the engagement phase of the work. For example, just transition, as I said, came out as a really important priority area for many countries, and so it was given its own route. Similarly, finance came up in a lot of discussions, and we heard a lot of people saying, you know, an ambitious NDC is really great, but a lot of countries are experiencing challenges related to unlocking the finance needed to implement their NDC, and that's why the Unlocked Finance route exists. So it became really clear, actually, from that engagement that there was a need for focus not only on raising ambition, but also implementation, as we see here. And that's not to say that NDCs should necessarily be implementation plans, but it is to say that they can be developed and framed in a way that makes them a really useful precursor for those plans and processes that come next. And I think the technology and capacity building route is a really nice example of this. So I already mentioned how identifying needs can be really useful for exploring how to achieve your NDC target, but it can also be a really useful precursor, for example, a technology action plan, which would come after the NDC. So both ambition and implementation, as has been said before, were really important for the Navigator. And as Sarah alluded to earlier, that focus comes at a really important time. So the first global stocktake, which concluded at COP28, assessed progress towards NDCs and the Paris Agreement goals and identified two key gaps. So firstly, a gap between NDC ambition and the level of ambition needed to meet those Paris Agreement goals, but also a gap between NDC ambition and actual implementation. So what the Navigator really seeks to do is support countries to close both of those gaps. And I think a key message here, as we can see, there's a lot here. And as Sarah mentioned earlier, beneath each route is a series of opportunities within which are a whole range of relevant strategies, case studies, resources. And it's important to say, we wouldn't expect countries to look at absolutely everything. There's a lot there, and some information is going to be more relevant than others. And this will inevitably vary country by country. And in this way, the Navigator sort of should be driven by country context. And if we go to the next slide, please, Sarah. We can explore how we might get from the start to the finish and understand which of those routes are most relevant and decide which to explore. And as I said before, you can enter at any point, but we thought it might be useful to see what a typical journey looks like if starting at Learn. So first, you might learn about the context for NDCs 3.0, including how to reflect the global stocktake and the intergovernmental process that has led to NDCs 3.0. And if we click again, we'll see that we can also learn about the tool, how it was developed and how it can be used to support NDC development. And if we click ahead again, thank you, we can see the next step would be to reflect on the last NDC and those needs and priorities for the next NDC. And as Rose will show you in a moment, there is a questionnaire available to support countries in doing this. A country can go in and answer a series of questions that will then help guide them towards the most relevant routes for their country needs and priorities. And if we click again, thank you, we can then explore those relevant opportunities, and that will involve navigating through the routes, the opportunities that lie beneath them to understand what strategies are available, see some country case studies, and see what guidance, tools, and resources exist under each of those opportunities. There's also some guiding questions at the beginning of each route that will help guide users towards the most relevant opportunities within that route. And finally, a country might then dig into the further resources provided under each opportunity and explore the guidance, tools, and support options that are already available and collated all in one place. So with that, I will hand over to Rose, who is going to demonstrate everything that I just spoke about. So Rose, over to you.
Thanks, Maya. And if I've got technology right, I should be able to take over the screen sharing now from Sarah. And one moment. Hopefully, appearing on your screens should be the NDC Navigator homepage. And I've just popped a link into the chat box in case anybody hasn't got it. For accessing the NDC 3.0 Navigator, and feel free to have a play, follow along, and explore this as we talk, and obviously at your leisure as well. So what we're going to do now is just have a little bit of a walk through the Navigator itself. I'm going to talk you through the different sections that Maya's just outlined. I'm not going to go into the detail of each of the routes yet, because I'm going to hand back to Maya to do that shortly. So we're just going to start with the homepage and the main content that you can access here. So this is the landing page that you will find when you first come to the NDC 3.0 Navigator. First thing to note is this button at the top, the little compass icon. At any point when you're in the tool, if you click here, this will bring you back to the homepage. So really useful to note that. The buttons that are also along the top of the screen here, you can use to access those 3 different areas that both Sarah and Maya have outlined. So learning about the Navigator, reflecting on your needs and priorities, and then exploring the routes. And you'll see if I hover over explore the routes, all 7 come up, and we can go directly to those. As Maya said, there's no right or wrong way to access this information. There's no ideal journey. You can come into different parts of the tool and use them as you find helpful. The last button here is for the support opportunities, and I'll show you that page towards the end. So this is the landing page. A short bit of text here on the main page that just summarizes again what the NDC 3.0 Navigator is about, the fact that it contains these opportunities that you can consider when developing NDC 3.0, the strategies available for each opportunity, the connecting routes and opportunities, and we'll see a little bit in practice how some of those work when Maya does her demo, the country case studies, and links to further resources. If I scroll down, this is hopefully now becoming a little bit familiar to you from the slides that we've gone through, but we'll see links to those 3 areas again. And then at the bottom of the page also are links to all of the individual routes that you can access. At the very bottom of the page, you can find the buttons for support opportunities and also sharing additional resources that Sarah mentioned we are encouraging people to do. And then the inputs, so the core team that delivered this work are there recognized at the bottom, and you can also see a link to all of the partners who contributed. So that's the homepage. Let's first of all have a little look in the Learn section. So Maya outlined that this contains lots of background about the Navigator, so how it was developed, who fed in, and some of the context. And I'll just show you how this is structured. So again, we've got a little bit of an introduction to outline what the Navigator is all about. And then if I scroll down, and you can also access each of these sections via the navigation bar on the left-hand side. So if I click about the NDC 3.0 Navigator, this is where you can find all of the information about this tool. So if you're not sure about how the tool is structured, you can click here and expand this button, and it explains a little bit about the sort of hierarchy of information and how information is nested within the pages. You'll see in the tool a lot of these expandable buttons. That's really because there's a lot of information in this tool, and if we didn't include these, you'd be scrolling forever. So this is a way that we've made the information a little more accessible, and you can quickly look across and find the things that you're most interested in, and then expand these buttons to read a little bit more. So if I look at, for instance, who can use the NDC Navigator, we've got a little bit of information there. How is it developed? we can see here, there's again a summary of the information we've shared with you already about the inputs that have received and the partners that were involved. So the next section in this page then is the context for NDCs 3.0. And actually, I will share with you that personally, I find this really helpful because many of you may sometimes not be able to remember which decision was important for establishing LTLEDs, or which decision is the one to look at for something else. And what we've really tried to do here in this section is just bring together quite a lot of that context into one easy, quick reference. It's important because it provides the foundation for NDCs 3.0 and the decisions that have been made about what is required of countries, but also brings that in one place where it's accessible. And if you need a quick reference, then this is a good place to come. So, for example, there's a bit of information here just about the progression from the intended nationally determined contributions to where we are now. And then we've got the intergovernmental processes and decisions regarding NDCs are all captured here with the key decisions and paragraphs and so on, if you need to refer to those. The outcome of the global stocktake can also be found here with links to the outcome, so you can go directly to those if you need to review that. And then the last section here is emphasizing the connections between NDCs and other national processes. And this is really important because NDCs are really part of the whole landscape of climate-related policy and legislation and regulations that are within countries and internationally. And NDCs really need to draw on and be integrated into this whole range of things that are going on at country level and internationally. So there's a few other key links here to things such as long-term low-emission development strategies, national adaptation plans, voluntary national reviews, sustainable development goals, and so on, and a nice graphic there showing some of those key interactions. So that's the context page. So if I scroll back to the top, and we'll go back to the home page, that's the About section. So as I said, that gives you all of the history of how this was developed, how it's structured, and the background information related to NDCs 3.0. The next section I'll look at is reflecting on country needs and priorities. And this is a little bit of a very simple tool or some guiding questions to really help users to identify which area of the navigator they might want to take a closer look at. Now, as Maya said, there's these 7 routes and each of them has lots of different opportunities within them, and countries are welcome to read everything, but there's a lot to read. So you might want to prioritize a little bit about where you go first. So this page is really about trying to emphasize that the NDCs 3.0 need to reflect that that progression in terms of both ambition and on implementation. And this might manifest itself in different ways for different countries that have different priorities, really reflecting that each country is on a different pathway to that next NDC in 2025. So this page contains a few guiding questions that might help you to get started. They're really intended to prompt reflection and identify a route that you might want to go and visit first in order to start your journey through the navigator. These questions are structured into 3 sections. So the first is looking back. So how did your last NDC process go? What were some of the gaps and challenges that you experienced? The present circumstances, and then the future direction. So where might you be looking to go with your next NDC? So if I demo this quickly and I'll show you how it works. So in terms of looking back, there's a couple of questions here. So what were some of the most significant gaps and challenges in the last NDC? To give an example, perhaps it was stakeholder engagement processes, So getting buy-in or inputs across government, aligning with national wider development priorities, perhaps that was a bit of a challenge for the last process. In assessing progress made on the last NDC, were any of the following significant barriers to targets and implementing actions? Well, similar to the last one, perhaps ensuring ownership and integration across government was a bit of a challenge. Then thinking about the present circumstances, are emissions in any sectors particularly high or growing? Yes, let's say that they are. And climate hazards or risks experienced currently or expected? Yes, I imagine that they are for most. Any populations negatively impacted? Yes, I think we could say that many people, many countries experience that. Any negative impacts on populations to be quantified? Maybe I don't know, so maybe I'll leave this question. You don't have to answer every question, only the ones that are helpful to you. Any new or updated plans or strategies, for example, and I might tick development plans and sectoral plans and non-party stakeholder plans, for example. And then some questions on future direction. Just 2 questions here. So firstly, are there any key technical or content areas for raising ambition that you might want to prioritize? So I might want to prioritize just transition, perhaps. And are there any key processes to support implementability that I might want to prioritize in the next NDC? And I might tick again that engaging all of government and society, because that was a gap last time. So if I then click the button, I can see what my recommended routes are. And unsurprisingly, because of what I ticked, the tool has suggested that I might want to go to the mobilizes all of government and all of society route as a starting point for exploring the navigator. And I am not going to click on that because we're going to explore some of the routes now in a bit more detail with Maya. But before I hand over, I am just going to go back to the top and just very quickly show you this last button here on support opportunities. And as Sarah has already mentioned, and she's put the link directly in the chat, there is a page here where you can put in your details and request more support. And that's the last of the main functions of the tool, except, sorry, no, it isn't. I will very quickly also just share you this page. So as Sarah also mentioned, we have the function to share additional resources and also strategies, good practices, case studies, examples, and general feedback. This tool really is aiming to be a living tool, and we recognise that it's built on all of the experience that currently exists, and that experience continues to evolve. So if you see something that's missing, if you know of a really great example that you think should be included within the navigator, this is the place to do that, and there is a form that you can submit that. So now I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to hand over to Maya, who's going to take us through the details of some of the routes.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rose. Can everyone see my screen, hopefully?
Yes.
Fantastic. So as Rose said, we're now going to use some example questions to explore those routes to ambitious and implementable NDCs in a little bit more detail and demonstrate how countries might use the tool to answer those questions. So we'll take 3 questions one by one. I'll introduce them quickly now, and then I'll jump over to the tool and we'll see how we might work through the tool to find the answers. So the first question is going to be focused on mitigation. We're going to ask, how can I enhance ambition in different sectors to contribute to a new or higher NDC target? The second question is going to be focused a little bit more on adaptation and just transition. So how can I ensure adaptation planning holistically considers societal needs? Then that third question is going to look a little bit more at the enhanced transparency framework and links to the BTRs. Very important, as many of us know, those are going to be due at the end of this year. So we're going to ask, how can I ensure the NDC is framed in a way that supports tracking of progress under the enhanced transparency framework? So what I will do now is hopefully jump over to the NDC Navigator tool. Fantastic. Wait for that to load. And then Rose, would you mind reminding me of what that first question was?
Yes, thank you, Maya. So first question was, how can I enhance ambition in different sectors to contribute to a new or higher NDC target? So which route would you go to find that information?
Yes, so click here at the top of the screen where we can see explore routes. I'll go here and we can see all of them together. As we said, this question is focused on mitigation. So we'll have a look in this route aligned to the Paris Agreement temperature goal. So let's have a click in here. And then we can see we get a bit of an introduction about this route, why it's important. And we've got some links here to, for example, the IPC 6th assessment report that's useful to read to understand a little bit more about the context behind some of these strategies. We can then see that we've got Paris Agreement in international context. If I click on this, we can see that there's some specific text from the Paris Agreement detailing sort of how it is relevant to this route. And then we can see that there is another drop down for reflecting the global stocktake. So what in the global stocktake was directly relevant to this route? We can see here that, for example, we've got a list of the global efforts that were included in the first global stocktake that are relevant to mitigation. What it might be useful to start with is these guiding questions. So do any of these speak to the question that we were asking, Rose?
Yes, I mean, I'm interested in setting targets, so maybe one of those first two opportunities.
Okay, let's start with the setting targets opportunity then. Seems like a good place to start. So we can see that we get a bit of an introduction about this opportunity. Again, some information on reflecting the global stocktake that'll be more specific to the opportunity rather than the route we just came from. And then if I scroll down a little bit further, we can see there's some strategies to help implement this opportunity. Each of these can be expanded. Before I expand on a couple of those, I'll quickly show what the rest of the page looks like. So we have some country examples directly related to this opportunity. So how this opportunity has previously been implemented in practice. And then we have all of the further resources related to this opportunity collated here. And right at the bottom, we have some links to other routes. So if we find that this strategy maybe doesn't have everything that we need, we can look at some of the links and see where we might want to go next. But what I'll do first, since we're looking at targets, I'll scroll back up to these strategies. And if I remember correctly, this was about enhancing ambition in sectors. So let's start by having a look at this strategy, adding sectors to NDC targets. I'll expand on that. We can see there's a little bit of an introduction on what the global stocktake says in reference to this, and then sort of a few steps that could be taken to implement this opportunity. It's really important to mention that this is not intended to be a how-to guide. It's just meant to prompt inspiration and provide links to those resources and other areas of the navigator that would also be relevant to look at. So how does this look to you, Rose?
Looks great. Thanks, Maya. What if I'm interested specifically in the energy sector, for example? Is there a part of the navigator that has specific sector opportunities?
Yes, there is. So if we look at the bottom of this strategy, we can see we are signposted to a separate opportunity for more details on opportunities to raise ambition in different sectors. So what I'll do is I can navigate to this from here, but also just to demonstrate, if I went back to the homepage for the route and went down to those opportunities, we can see that that is also housed there. But what's really nice about the navigator is we try to embed those links in the strategies so you don't always have to jump back and you can see where things are directly related to certain strategies. So let's jump into this one. Looks very similar to the other opportunity that we just looked at, but I think what's important to note about this one, and this is the only opportunity for which this will be the case, is that there is a lot more detail here and slightly different framing. So if I have a look at the reflecting the global stocktake section, we can see that we really clearly pull out the outcomes related to mitigation recommendations from the global stocktake. So those global efforts around tripling renewable energy capacity, accelerating efforts towards net zero emission systems, utilizing low carbon fuels, and so on. What's also useful to note is that this page also covers adaptation. The global stocktake addresses both, and there are sectoral opportunities for both mitigation and adaptation, sometimes with some crossover. So this page houses actually everything together. But you wanted to look specifically at the energy sector. So let's scroll down to those strategies and see what we have. So I can see that this first strategy, which is framed in a way that takes text directly from the global stocktake, so we can directly respond to that sort of outcome in the global stocktake, is looking at renewable energy capacity, energy efficiency improvements, and the low carbon energy transition. So this seems like a pretty good place to start. I'll expand on that. And as you can see, there is quite a bit more detail than some of the strategies we looked at previously. So we know that there is a lot of resources at a very specific sectoral level, and some of those sort of at a step-by-step level. So what we've done here is we've pulled out some of the key steps that can be taken if they are relevant to countries to enhance global efforts on the energy sector. So how do these steps look? Is there anything more that would be useful to look at?
Yeah, thanks, Maya. I think there's also a section that collates all of those resources in one place so that I can reference them. I can find them quite quickly. Can you show me that on the page?
Yep. So as we can see here, there are a lot of resources that are directly in the text, so we know specifically what step they link to. But it's really useful to see that at the bottom of the page, we have them all collated into this further resources section and split by sector. So we have some cross-sectoral resources that are useful to look at whatever sector you're interested in. But then if I scroll down, we'll see, hopefully, that there is a section with a specific resources for the energy sector. So if you were looking to enhance ambition in the energy sector, there is a range of resources that you could look at to do that. Maybe you want to look at opportunities in the power sector, or maybe you want to have a look at the water, energy, and food nexus. And there's quite a range of different resources there, all housed in one place, so you can find them easily.
That's great. Thank you, Maya. Should we go back to the homepage and answer the next question?
Let's do it.
So the second question was related to adaptation, and it reflects that actually for a lot of countries, especially in the global south, they are highly vulnerable to climate impacts, and reflecting adaptation goals in the next NDC is something that's particularly important. But adaptation planning, obviously, it's really important that it happens inclusively. So how can I ensure adaptation planning holistically considers all societal needs? Is that something that the Navigator can help me with?
Indeed, it can. So let's go back into the Explore section and have a look at a high level at what routes are available to explore. This query was around adaptation, so I suggest we start by diving into Aligns to the Paris Agreement Global Goal on Adaptation. So I'll click in there. You can see that the layout is very similar to what we just saw for Aligns to the Paris Agreement Temperature Goal, where we have some introductory information, some information on the Paris Agreement in international context, and reflecting the global stocktake. Perhaps for this one, rather than go via these guiding questions, let's have a look down at the whole suite of opportunities that's available to us. And this question was really about incorporating all of society in that adaptation planning. So this opportunity, incorporating all of society in adaptation planning, seems like a good place to go. So I'll click in here. And we can see we've got the introduction and a series of strategies. Do any of these strategies do the job, or is there anywhere else we'd like to look?
Thanks, Maya. No, I think there's some good examples here of the types of engagement, the types of organizations and things I might want to do to ensure an inclusive process. But actually, I'm thinking that it would also be useful to look at some information specifically on engagement, because I think it links directly to this. So can you show me how I can navigate to other sections of the Navigator that cover the engagement piece?
Yep. A really useful way to do this is to look at which routes have direct links to where we started. So if I scroll down to the bottom of the page, we can see we've got this section on how this links to other routes. So we can see that route delivers a just and equitable transition has elements of engaging all of society. but route mobilizes all of government and all of society, also has strategies on engagement. Is there one or the other that you'd prefer to go to?
Well, my guiding questions earlier prompted all of government and all of society, so I'd quite like to go there. Thanks.
Let's have a look. So if we have a look at the mobilizes all of government and all of society route, and perhaps we'll jump again straight to these opportunities and see whether anything is relevant, we can see that there is a really nice opportunity here on incorporating all voices and ensuring inclusive engagement. There's also some other opportunities based on engaging local and regional governments and ensuring effective coordination across government. So depending on who you are prioritizing engagement with, there's a few different opportunities there you could look at. And usefully, we also have a link back to that page we previously came from. We find that this opportunity is relevant to both the adaptation route and the mobilizes all of government and all of society route. So we've made it the case that you can access it from both places, as it might be relevant to concerns related to each.
Great, thanks, Maya. That's really good. Shall we look at the final question?
Yes, so let's go back to the overview of the routes and see where we want to go next.
So the final question really reflects that at the moment, a lot of countries are quite deep in preparation of their first BTRs, and they might be thinking about how the BTR process and the transparency process can support the way that they do their next NDC. So the question is, how can I ensure that NDC is framed in a way that supports tracking of progress under the enhanced transparency framework? Is there guidance within a navigator that would align with that particular need?
Yep, definitely. As I mentioned earlier, issues related to the enhanced transparency framework are covered under this route, technically sound and transparent documents. So I'll jump into here. And in this route, it's really useful to note actually that in the Paris Agreement section, we have a link to the modalities, procedures, and guidelines for the enhanced transparency framework. So if you're struggling to find those, the NDC Navigator has a link directly to them. And again, there's also some information on reflecting the global stocktake and how this is relevant to this route. What I will do is I will have a look at these guiding questions to see if any of them match up identically or closely to our question, and that will help me decide which opportunity might be the best to look at first. So, having a look at these questions, it seems to me that this fourth one here is the information necessary to track progress made in implementing and achieving NDCs as part of the enhanced transparency framework supporting the development of NDC 3.0. That seems to be close enough to our question. So I'd suggest we start with opportunity aligning the NDC with transparency processes. So I'll jump in here. And perhaps I will scroll straight down to some strategies that could be used to help implement this opportunity. So we have strategies around preparing for enhanced transparency framework tracking. We have integration of reporting cycles, understanding and acting upon challenges for non-Annex 1 parties, identifying clear and appropriate indicators, and developing robust NDC tracking frameworks to incorporate transparency in the NDC process. Are there any of these that you'd like to look at in a little bit more detail?
Oh, maybe preparing for ETF tracking?
Let's have a look in here. So we can see that there's a bit of an introduction and some steps that could be taken to prepare for ETF tracking as part of the NDC process. And interestingly, there is a resource linked directly in this text. So the guidance for accounting for NDCs with greenhouse gas emission targets from PAPA might be useful to explore in a little bit more detail if you did want to go and implement that strategy. So if I clicked on this, it takes us to the NDC Partnership Knowledge Portal. And this is something I wanted to highlight, that our resources are all hosted on the NDC Partnerships Knowledge Portal. So you could access the Knowledge Portal separately, and you could find some more resources and more tools by the same developer. But it's useful to note that what is covered here will not all be in the Navigator. So there'll be additional resources that maybe weren't selected for inclusion here, but sort of we had a bit of a more selective process than the Knowledge Portal does. So if you find that something isn't included in an opportunity under the further resources section, it's worth looking in the Knowledge Portal. But as Rose said earlier, there's also the opportunity to share more resources. So if you think something is missing, you can click on that Share Resources page. Also useful to look at on this page is the country examples. So perhaps we've had a look at the strategies and it's really useful information, but what would be more useful is to see how that has been implemented in practice in the past by a country, and maybe to get some real on the ground insights from that. So we can see here, we've got some country examples. We've got Moldova, who used their greenhouse gas inventory to align with the ETF reporting. And we have Rwanda, who developed a framework for tracking the implementation of the NDC, which included a range of indicators, which of course is useful for buying a transparency report. And we could click on the source for these case studies. And in many cases, we'll get a little bit more information. So here is a summary of the Rwanda work that was explained on that page. And as I mentioned before, there are a range of resources at the bottom here that could be explored further to see if maybe there's a tool that could help develop indicators for the enhanced transparency framework, or maybe there's a little bit more guidance on something that we were a little bit unsure of. And as Rose showed earlier, we could also go back to the home page. And if we think something's missing, whether that's a case study or a resource, we can go in here, click Submit Resources. We'll be taken to this. And there is a form that we could click on. Hopefully it will load. And we could fill this out and give a few more details on the resource, case study, or strategy we would like to share. So hopefully that's a good example of how we could use Navigator to explore a few questions.
Great, thank you, Maya. Oh, sorry.
And now I believe we have a bit of an interactive activity. So what I will do is share my screen with this QR code. And in fact, what I should do is drop it in the chat, or if you're able to drop the code and link in the chat, Rose, that would be great. You should be able to scan this QR code and it will take you to a platform called Mentimeter, where you'll see hopefully just one question, but we will move through that. And I think there'll be 7 questions that will sort of give an opportunity to provide a little bit of feedback on the NDC 3.0 Navigator, and then a little bit of a test for those who want to follow along with us and see if they can find the information that we're asking for. So I'll leave this up for a couple of minutes and let everyone join. And then I'll switch over and we'll go through the questions. If you're unable to join this because of technical difficulties or technological limitations, don't worry, that's fine. You'll also have an opportunity to feedback through the Q&A at the end, and also there's an opportunity to put any comments in the chat. So we'll pick up as many of those as we can. Okay, I'll start with the question and we'll see how many people have managed to get online. If we need a few more minutes, that's absolutely fine. So let's jump over to men's speech. Oh, brilliant. We've already got plenty of people answering. So our first question was, which of the routes to ambitious and implementable NDCs are you most interested in exploring? And interestingly, but somewhat unsurprisingly, we've got the highest number of responses on unlocks finance. We expected that. It came up a lot in our interviews and surveys, and we knew it was going to be a really important one. And as I said, that's sort of why it's going through that additional rigorous review before it's actually published. We've also got a few choices for aligned to the Paris Agreement temperature goal, which is great. And then a few split across the others as well. Fantastic. I'll leave this up for another minute and we'll see if we get any more responses, and if not, I can move on. Fantastic. Let's do it. Let's go to the next question. So, how do you think the NDC 3.0 Navigator might help you with your next NDC? And we've got a few options here. It might be helping identify new opportunities to reflect. It might be raising awareness of the practical strategies that could be taken, helping to identify those opportunities to raise ambition, identifying the most impactful country relevant opportunities, accessing the guidance and resources that we saw collated under that further resources section just a moment ago, helping to identify and structure support requests to the NDC partnership, or framing the NDC in a way that supports those next steps and implementation. Or if you have any other ways that you think that the NDC Navigator might help with your next NDC, feel free to put the details in the chat. We're happy to hear any ideas. Some interesting responses here. I'm pleased to see that accessing guidance and resources is coming up strongly, as that was a really key aim of the Navigator, to bring all of the guidance that is housed all in different locations on the internet into one accessible place. Really good to see that that seems like it's going to be a useful feature. Brilliant. Lots of responses for how helping to identify opportunities to raise ambition. Great. I think that's a really interesting result. Seems that accessing guidance and resources has definitely come out the most strongly. So that seems quite positive. Let's have a look at the next question then. Do you have any suggestions or feedback on the tool? Anything at all? All feedback is welcome. And if it's something you don't want to post in here, it will come up as a word cloud on the screen. If it's something that you don't want to post here, that's not a problem at all. You can put it in the chat, we can put it anonymously, or you can feedback separately through the tool itself. And we'll also have a slide at the end for sort of some more anonymous feedback. So you can also do it through the Mentimeter in a couple of questions time if you don't want to have it put up on the screen.
And Maya, one quick question. Will this Mentimeter be available for input after the session closes? Should someone want to add something in the next, hour or so after the webinar ends?
That is a good question. I don't think it will be. I think that I have to have it open and accessible, okay, but I might be wrong. I will check on that and I'll get back to you.
That's okay. So in that case, if you have additional feedback and you're not able to add them to the Mentimeter, you can absolutely use the additional resources submit form on the Navigator website, and that will go to us as well. Or you can put it in the Q&A here, as Maya mentioned.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sarah. And it seems like we're getting some good responses in. So some feedback that it looks really practical and easy to use. That's really positive. We know we had some initial feedback at the beginning that navigating the Navigator was somewhat of a challenge. So that's why we wanted to host this webinar, to make sure everyone really understood where you can start, where you can finish, all the different entry points. So really pleased to see that people are finding that it looks easy to use. And yes, interesting to see training pop up. We hope that it will be used sort of raise capacity across a lot of different groups. So that's really positive as well. Great. I'll go to the next question, which I believe is a little bit more of a quiz. But I should hide the correct answers. I hope no one saw that. So if anyone wants to have a look and open up the Navigator, see if you can find where the information on nature-based solutions, see if you're able to answer this question. I'll give a little bit more time for this one because I know for some people this might be one of your first opportunities to really dive into the Navigator. So I'll give everyone a minute to see if they can find that. Great, we've got a few responses here, so I will go ahead and show the correct answer, which is sneakily 2 different routes. So you can find information on nature-based solutions, both under Alliance to the Paris Agreement temperature goal, due to its links to mitigation and carbon reductions. And you can also find it under Alliance to the Paris Agreement global goal on adaptation. Now, I was going to go through 2 more questions that are similar to this, but it seems that people have managed to get the hang of it, and I'm aware that we're running out of time, and we'd like to leave a bit of time for the Q&A. So I think what I might do is stop here, and Rose, if you want to take over, we can dive into the questions and answers.
Right, hopefully that's come through. Sharing?
I can see it.
Yes.
Excellent. Great. So thank you so much, everyone, for your attention to this point. Hopefully what you've heard has given you a good understanding of how the NDC 3.0 Navigator was developed, why it was developed, what we hope it will do, and how it's structured, and how you can find and navigate to the information that you might need. Also important to say, it is obviously not exhaustive. There are always going to be other things that could be included that have not been included at this point, and we very much recognise that, and it is as such a bit of a living tool, which we hope can be further built on and developed over time, but very much hope that it is useful to you all as you start or finish or are going through your NDC 3.0 journey. So this is now an opportunity, and I'm aware we've not got a lot of time, but hopefully we have enough time to take a few questions that anyone might want to ask. So all 4 of us speakers from the webinar are online and able to answer any questions. So Sarah from the NDC Partnership, Monica from the UNFCCC secretariat, and myself and Maya from Ricardo as the technical developers of the tool. So Sarah, I don't know if there's any questions in the chat that you want to kick us off with.
There are not any in the chat, but there are 2 in the Q&A that seem to be more suggestions, but I can read them aloud as well, just so we can respond to them also. So they're both from the same person. So the first one is that many countries have not yet implemented their updated NDCs due to the lack of I apologize, I don't know the acronym, if it's MOI or MOL, apologies, in the NDCs, means of implementation, I assume, in the NDCs 3.0. And if you follow the Navigator, there are still gaps of resources on how it can enhance the acceleration of opportunities to enhance implementation and contribute to the Paris Agreement goals. So I guess the question or comment would be more about adding more resources related to actually implementing. And then the second is a suggestion that the navigator be associated with the CB in the ETF and other issues related to country needs and challenges. So I don't know if we want to address the implementation piece and how we thought about it, or anything else related to that question, any of our panel.
Yeah, I'm happy to go for it. And Monica, maybe you have some thoughts on this as well. But yes, no, thanks. It's a great question, and actually, I suppose I hope I partly answered it a little bit just in my introduction to the Q&A there. That NDCs and the next round of NDCs cover such a huge range of things and a whole range of different country needs and priorities. And with really limited time, there was a need to focus and prioritize on what were the most impactful opportunities across those 7 routes. So there will likely always be things that that are gaps, things that people identify that could be included that are not currently included. So the 2 things that I would respond to this point are that the content of the navigator was developed through a very participatory process with countries and a whole range of organizations to really hone in on what were the most critical areas to address, the most impactful opportunities and strategies. So that's why those have been prioritized and perhaps other areas are missing. But then the second point is, as Sarah said, because we recognize this is a living tool and it will be developed and evolve over time, there is that page to submit suggestions and submit further resources. So if there are requests for specific areas and topics to be included explicitly within the navigator, then please do share those directly with the team, and we can put those into the list of possible future updates that we can address. And also, if you have guidance or examples that you think would complement the existing resources, then we really do encourage that to be shared.
Thank you, Rose. I'm taking over, and thank you, Hannah, for the suggestion. I think it's a great suggestion, and I will share it with my colleagues at the transparency team. And also, I want to take this opportunity to inform you that the UNFCCC Secretariat has a dedicated website on NDC 3.0, where you can find also more resources. And I hope that Navigator is, of course, there and in premium place. So thank you very much for making the links. Exactly, the Navigator wants to do these linkages between all the topics that are important for the NDC. And as maybe you remember seeing like a puzzle in the About section, the NDCs definitely are linked and related to a lot of other Paris Agreement topics and commitments. So thank you very much for this suggestion. We will take it over. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much. And considering time, I think we likely will only have the opportunity to answer one more question, which I see in the chat. I have translated it from French to English, and it is related to having face-to-face trainings or capacity building on using the navigator. And I thank you for that question. We definitely believe that that would be something that is useful for countries and also for partners. And we are currently, we meaning the NDC Partnership, the UNFCCC Secretariat, UNEP and UNDP, as well as a few other partners, are in the process of organizing NDC 3.0 regional forums, where there will be a number of countries invited to different regions to discuss NDCs 3.0, and the navigator will be one of those sessions. So there will be definitely the opportunity for countries to engage in those. There will also be specific trainings for in-country facilitators of the NDC partnership member countries that we are working on. So facilitators will be able to have those trainings, some of them in person, some of them virtually. But if you believe there is additional need for in-person or face-to-face trainings or capacity building workshops, etc., on using the Navigator for your country, and that other opportunities are not going to be sufficient or not relevant to you, please let us know. We're trying to investigate the best way for us to provide trainings to countries that would like to have specific trainings offered. And it may not be possible to do so face to face. We of course know that that would be the preferred for an interactive tool like this, but we will be trying to offer some virtual options as well that are more specific and tailored to an audience or topic. So if anyone else has any comment on that, or leave it at that. Great. Well, thank you all very much for spending your time with us today to go through the NDC 3.0 Navigator. There are opportunities, as we said, for you to engage with it directly by requesting more information from the NDC Partnership on how to get support for your country in developing their NDC 3.0, and also to submit any additional resources that could be guidance documents, online tools, strategies, case studies, etc., that you would like to see reflected in the NDC 3.0 Navigator. So with that, thank you again for joining us. This will be posted on the NDC Partnership YouTube page, and expect a follow-up email from us with all other resources. And thank you again for joining. We hope you have a great rest of your day.